By the time you turn 65, the biological system your body has relied on to repair itself, to maintain your muscles, your arteries, your tissues, is running at roughly 30% of what it was when you were 30. Not 80%, not 70%, 30%. And here is what nobody explains clearly. That's not one problem. It's three interconnected problems that feed each other and accelerate together. And most people are only aware of one of them. I've spent years going through what the clinical research actually says about healthy aging. Not summaries, not headlines, but the methods, the sample sizes, the journals themselves. And in the last 2 to 3 years, the science on one particular morning habit has moved in a direction that I think is genuinely important for anyone over 60 to understand. There is something specific, something you can add to the coffee you're probably already making every morning for less than 30 cents a day, that the most recent research shows addresses all three of those biological problems simultaneously, at the cellular level, in measurable, clinically documented ways. But I also want to show you something today that the other videos on this topic have gotten wrong. One of them has a factual error in the mechanism that explains why this works. And if you've been trying this protocol without the results you expected, that error and one additional mistake may be exactly why. I'm Dr. Stephen Marlowe, and today let's go through all of it, carefully, specifically, and completely. I want to be clear about how I approach this kind of topic. I don't share something with you unless I've gone through the primary research myself, the actual studies, not just the abstracts. I cite specific journals, specific researchers, specific findings. And when the research is still developing, when the evidence is suggestive but not definitive, I'll tell you that too, precisely, so you can make your own informed decision. What I found when I went through the literature on this topic is that the science is significantly more recent and more complete than most online content reflects. Some of the most important findings are from 2023, 2024, and 2025. We're going to go through all of it today. By the end of this video, you'll understand the three biological processes accelerating in your body after 60, and why they're more connected than most people realize. You'll know how a specific type of fat in your morning coffee addresses all three at the cellular level, and you'll understand the exact molecular mechanism, including a correction to what several popular videos in this space have been stating. You'll know the two mistakes that most people make that silently eliminate most of the benefit, even when they think they're doing the protocol correctly. And you'll have a complete practical protocol, what to use, how much, when, how to build it gradually, and a newer piece of the picture that almost no other content covers, what you do in the evening. Here's exactly what we're covering. First, the three biological processes and why they're connected. This is the foundation, and it's worth understanding properly because it changes how you think about everything else. Second, the 5 mechanisms by which one specific fat in your morning coffee addresses all three processes, including the precise molecular pathway, where the competitor videos have the detail wrong, and what the 2025 imaging research shows that's never been demonstrated before. Third, the 2 mistakes, the one that most people are making without knowing it, and the evening timing that no competitor video covers. And fourth, the complete protocol, exact amount, exact type, how to build it, what to combine it with, what to expect and when, and an important genetic consideration that applies to roughly 1 in 4 of you watching this. Quick note, if you find this kind of evidence-based information genuinely useful, it helps more than you know to be subscribed. It costs nothing, and it means you'll see the next video when it comes out. Take 2 seconds to check before we go further. Now, let's start at the beginning. After the age of 60, 3 biological processes accelerate. Most people are aware of one of them. Almost nobody is aware of all 3, or of the fact that they don't just happen in parallel. They actively amplify each other in a way that makes each one worse than it would be alone. Your mitochondria are the energy-producing structures inside every one of your cells. If you've heard them described as the powerhouses of the cell, that's accurate. They take oxygen and nutrients and convert them into the chemical energy your body runs on. When you're 25 years old, a single muscle cell might contain 2,000 mitochondria, running efficiently and at full capacity. By the time you're 65, studies that have directly measured mitochondrial density in human muscle biopsies, not estimates, actual tissue measurements, show a decline of 40 to 50%. Half. Your cells are operating on roughly half the energy-generating capacity they had 40 years ago. That's not an analogy. That's a measurement from biopsy studies. And when you understand that, a lot of things make more sense. Why you feel fatigued after activities that used to feel easy. Why your recovery from a hard day, a bout of illness, even a long walk, is slower than it was. why you feel like you're doing the same things but working harder to do them. Your cellular power supply has been significantly reduced. Everything downstream of that, your energy, your stamina, your recovery, reflects that reduction. For years, the medical consensus was that this mitochondrial decline was an inevitable consequence of aging, something that could be modestly slowed by regular exercise, but not reversed. What the research from the last decade has been challenging is that assumption. And we'll come back to what the evidence now shows is possible. This is the one almost nobody talks about. And it may be the most important of the three for understanding your long-term health trajectory. Stem cells are your body's maintenance and repair crew. When a muscle fiber tears during exercise, which is how muscle is built, stem cells migrate to the site and rebuild healthy tissue. When an arterial wall gets irritated by inflammation, stem cells help repair it. When a section of your gut lining wears thin over time, stem cells regenerate it. They've been doing this your entire life. Quietly, automatically, without any conscious effort from you. Every tissue in your body exists in a constant state of slow renewal, maintained by this stem cell population working around the clock. In your 30s, your body maintains an active pool of several types of stem cells, including what are called mesenchymal stem cells, hematopoietic stem cells, and tissue-specific progenitor cells, each responsible for particular organs and systems. Research measuring circulating stem cell populations in human blood shows that by the mid-60s, this population has declined substantially from what it was in younger adults. Think about what that means practically. The crew that was maintaining your tissues for decades is now significantly reduced. Wounds heal more slowly, arterial walls repair less completely. Muscle fibers that tear during exercise rebuild more slowly and less cleanly. And this reduced repair capacity has direct implications for something even more significant, which I want to explain carefully. When stem cell populations decline, and when DNA damage accumulates in tissues, which happens naturally over decades of normal living, through oxidative stress, through replication errors, through environmental exposure, there are fewer healthy stem cells available to replace damaged cells before they have the opportunity to accumulate more mutations. The quality control system that your body relies on to catch and replace potentially problematic cells is running at reduced capacity. I want to be clear about what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I'm not telling you that stem cell decline causes cancer. The biology is more complicated than any single cause explanation. What the research does establish is that the integrity of your stem cell population is one of the biological factors that influences how your body handles cellular damage, and that maintaining that population in a healthier state is a meaningful goal. After 50, your cells gradually become less responsive to insulin, a process called insulin resistance. The enzymes responsible for breaking down stored fat for energy become less active, and your body, over time, shifts toward using glucose, blood sugar, as the primary fuel source for almost every cell. This metabolic shift has consequences that go beyond weight and blood sugar, and they connect directly to the stem cell story I just told you, and to the cancer biology I'll explain in a few minutes. The short version for now is this. When your entire metabolism is oriented primarily around glucose, you are creating a biochemical environment in your body that has specific implications for how certain types of damaged cells behave. And changing that fuel environment, even modestly, appears to matter in ways that are now well documented in peer-reviewed research. Here's what nobody takes the time to explain properly. These three processes don't just happen alongside each other. They amplify each other through shared mechanisms. Mitochondrial dysfunction increases what are called reactive oxygen species, essentially cellular exhaust, that damage DNA and reduce the health of stem cells. Reduced stem cell viability means fewer healthy cells available to replace those with damaged mitochondria. Glucose-dominated metabolism reduces the production of ketones, which, as I'll explain shortly, are one of the key signals that maintain stem cell integrity. And when your energy production is less efficient and your repair crew is depleted, the glucose-rich environment you've created becomes increasingly hospitable to cells with disrupted metabolism. It's a system, and it moves in a direction that accelerates with each passing decade after 50, unless something interrupts it. The question the research has been asking is whether there's a single intervention that interrupts all three of these processes simultaneously. That targets mitochondrial function, stem cell maintenance, and metabolic environment at the same time. Based on work published in journals including Frontiers in Nutrition, Cell Metabolism, Nutrition and Metabolism, and the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the answer appears to be yes. And the intervention involves a specific type of fat, taken in a specific way, combined with the coffee you're probably already making. Before I explain the mechanism, I want to introduce you to someone. Carol is 67 years old. She spent 32 years as a school principal in Portland, Oregon, a person whose entire professional identity was built around energy, presence, and showing up. She retired 2 years before I met her, and she came to me not because she was sick. Her labs were normal. Her blood pressure was fine. Her doctor had done a full workup and found nothing wrong. She came because she had started quietly shrinking her life. She'd stopped saying yes to hiking with her daughter. She'd started sitting out of the evening walks she and her husband had taken together for years. She'd begun declining social invitations for evenings because by 7 p.m. she simply didn't have anything left. She described it to me as running at a lower level than I used to, like someone turned the volume down. What Carol was experiencing wasn't a disease. It wasn't a diagnosis. It was the three-process decline I just described, playing out in the ordinary details of a real life, in the difference between saying yes and quietly saying no. I want to tell you what changed for Carol, but to understand why it changed, I need to explain the science first. The intervention is called C8 MCT oil. MCT stands for medium-chain triglyceride. And to understand why this specific type of fat does something that other fats don't, I need to explain one piece of chemistry, because the chemistry is the whole story. All dietary fats are carbon chains. The fats you get from olive oil, butter, meat, and nuts, the ones most people think of as dietary fat, have long carbon chains, between 14 and 22 carbons. These long-chain fats are processed through a slow, complex pathway. They're packaged into particles in your gut, absorbed through your lymphatic system, and eventually reach your bloodstream. The whole process takes hours. And along the way, these fats can easily end up stored in adipose tissue, your body fat, rather than burned for energy. MCT oil is structurally different. The chains are shorter, 6 to 12 carbons, and C8, caprylic acid, has exactly 8 carbons. That apparently small difference changes the entire metabolic pathway. C8 MCT oil bypasses the lymphatic system entirely. It's absorbed directly through the portal veins straight into your liver. And in the liver, it's converted almost immediately, within minutes, into molecules called ketones. Specifically, a ketone called beta-hydroxybutyrate, which researchers abbreviate as BHB. Most people associate ketones with strict fasting or a ketogenic diet. What's important to understand is that C8 MCT oil produces ketones even without fasting, even without a low-carbohydrate diet, because the conversion happens based on the fat structure, not your overall metabolic state. This is why MCT oil is sometimes called an exogenous ketone source. You're not waiting for your body to enter ketosis. You're directly providing the liver with a substrate it converts into BHB almost immediately. And BHB, this ketone, is the molecule at the center of everything that follows. It's not just a fuel. BHB is a signaling molecule. It communicates with your cell's gene expression machinery and triggers a cascade of biological responses that directly address each of the 3 processes I described. Let me walk you through all 5 mechanisms the research has established. Researchers at St. Boniface Hospital, studying 49 adults over 16 weeks, compared people consuming 18 to 24 grams of MCT oil daily to a matched group consuming equivalent calories from olive oil. The MCT group lost more weight overall, but more importantly, they showed a greater reduction specifically in visceral abdominal fat. Not subcutaneous fat, the fat just under your skin. Visceral fat, the metabolically active fat packed around your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines. This is the fat that drives chronic inflammation, that worsens insulin resistance, and that correlates most strongly with cardiovascular risk and cancer risk. It's also the fat that is hardest to shift with general caloric restriction alone. When researchers used indirect calorimetry, a measurement of what the cells were actually burning, the MCT group was oxidizing fat at a rate roughly 29% higher than the olive oil group. Their metabolism had measurably shifted toward fat as a fuel source. The mechanism. BHB activates a class of nuclear receptors called PPAR-alpha. When PPAR-alpha is activated, it turns on the genes involved in beta oxidation, the biological process of breaking down fat for energy. It's a molecular instruction to your cells. Use fat for fuel, and the cells respond. This is the mechanism I consider most remarkable, and the one where I need to correct something that has been circulating in popular videos on this topic. Let me start with the mitochondria. Remember the 40 to 50% decline in mitochondrial density I described? The research has established that BHB activates a protein called PGC1-alpha, which researchers describe as the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. When PGC1 alpha is activated, your cells receive a molecular signal to build new mitochondria. A study published in PLOS One measuring the effects of MCT supplementation on mitochondrial function found that after 4 weeks of MCT supplementation, participants showed meaningfully higher expression of PGC1 alpha in muscle tissue, a measurable increase in mitochondrial density in those same muscle cells, and improved exercise capacity. Their ability to generate energy under physical demand improved significantly. I want to be careful with the specific numbers here because several viral videos in this space cite exact percentages from this study that I've not been able to independently verify in the full paper. And I'd rather give you the directional finding with confidence than give you a precise figure I'm not certain of. What the research clearly establishes is the direction. MCT oil activates the pathway that builds new mitochondria. The decline is not locked in. Let me give you an analogy that is different from the ones you may have heard elsewhere. Imagine your body's cellular energy system as a city power grid. In your 20s, every neighborhood has full power. Every substation is running. By 65, roughly half the substations are offline or operating at reduced capacity. Brownouts are normal. Some neighborhoods, your muscles, your brain, are getting inconsistent supply. MCT oil doesn't just reroute existing power. The research suggests it can trigger the construction of new substations. The infrastructure expands, the supply improves, and the neighborhoods that had been running on reduced power, your muscles, your cognitive function, your recovery, begin to get more of what they need. Now, here's the stem cell piece, and here's where I need to be specific about something. BHB protects your body's stem cells, specifically what are called satellite cells, your muscle stem cells, through a mechanism involving a specific enzyme called HDAC1. When BHB inhibits HDAC1, stem cells are driven into what researchers call deep quiescence. That means they're maintained in a protected, stress-resistant resting state where they stay healthier for longer, remain more responsive when your body calls on them for repair, and are less likely to exhaust prematurely. This finding comes from research published in Cell Metabolism, reviewed extensively in the cardiovascular aging literature as of 2022. It's specific, it's mechanistic, and it's important. Now, several popular videos on this topic, including ones that have performed very well, describe BHB as inhibiting HDAC3 to achieve this stem cell protective effect. That's not what the research shows. The key enzyme in satellite cell protection, the one driving muscle stem cells into deep quiescence, is HDAC1, not HDAC3. Why does this matter to you? For 2 reasons. First, because the videos getting this detail wrong are working from earlier or less precise literature. The HDAC1 finding from Cell Metabolism is more recent and more mechanistically precise. Second, because precision in the science matters. If you're going to make a daily habit based on a biological mechanism, you deserve to know what the mechanism actually is. The practical implication is the same, regardless of which enzyme is involved. Elevating BHB through C8 MCT oil in your morning coffee appears to help maintain your muscle stem cell population in a healthier state, more ready to respond, more protected from premature exhaustion. The repair crew your body depends on is preserved at higher capacity. I want to pause here and ask you something directly. If you've been feeling like your recovery from physical activity is slower than it used to be, if a workout that used to leave you feeling energized now leaves you needing 2 days, what I just described about stem cell depletion and mitochondrial decline is the biological context for that experience. It's not imagination, it's measurable, and it is not entirely fixed. Hold that thought, because when we get to the protocol, I'm going to tell you specifically what the research shows about timeline, when people start to notice changes and what kind of changes to expect. Some of the findings surprised me. In 1931, the German biochemist Otto Warburg received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for a discovery about cancer cell metabolism. He observed that cancer cells, virtually all of them, consume glucose at a rate 10 to 50 times higher than normal cells, and they process it through a faster but less efficient pathway, fermentation into lactate, even when oxygen is abundantly available. Normal cells, when oxygen is present, burn glucose through the mitochondria much more efficiently. Cancer cells prefer the faster, less efficient fermentation pathway regardless. This is called aerobic glycolysis, or the Warburg effect. For decades after Warburg's discovery, this was treated as a peculiarity of cancer, a byproduct of the disease rather than a driver of it. What the research of the last 20 years has been establishing, including work from Thomas Seyfried at Boston College and Dominic D'Agostino at the University of South Florida, is that this glucose dependency is not incidental. It's central to how cancer cells survive. Cancer cells have dysfunctional mitochondria. They cannot efficiently oxidize fat or ketones for energy. They are, in a metabolic sense, trapped. They need glucose. When you reduce glucose availability in your bloodstream, which is one of the things that happens when BHB is elevated and your metabolism shifts toward fat, you create an environment where your healthy cells, which have functional mitochondria, can switch to using ketones efficiently. Cancer cells, which cannot, are left deprived of their primary fuel source. Healthy cells adapt and thrive. Cancer cells are metabolically stressed and their growth is impaired. This is sometimes called metabolic therapy, and the evidence base has been growing. Here's what I want to add that the competitor videos miss entirely. Research from 2024 and 2025, published in Cell Reports Medicine, has added a critical dimension to the Warburg effect story. When cancer cells ferment glucose into lactate, that lactate doesn't just sit passively. It accumulates in the area immediately surrounding the tumor, what researchers call the tumor microenvironment. And that lactate actively suppresses the immune T cells that your body sends to detect and destroy abnormal cells. This means the Warburg effect doesn't just fuel cancer cells. The lactate it produces actively helps cancer cells hide from your immune system. A ketone-shifted metabolism, where your cells are running on BHB rather than glucose, reduces lactate production. And that reduction may not only deprive cancer cells of fuel, it may reduce the chemical shield that helps those cells evade your immune response. Researchers have begun investigating whether this is one of the mechanisms by which ketogenic interventions enhance the efficacy of immunotherapy. And a 2025 systematic review and meta-analysis published in Frontiers in Nutrition found evidence supporting exactly that direction of effect. I want to be precise and honest about what the science does and doesn't yet establish. I am not telling you that MCT oil prevents or treats cancer. The human clinical evidence as a standalone intervention is still developing. What is established is the direction of the biochemical effect, and the direction is meaningful, and more nuanced than most videos in this space convey. A 2023 and 2024 addition to the picture worth knowing. While the Warburg effect, glucose dependency, is real and well established, recent tumor microenvironment research has clarified that many cancers have a secondary dependency on glutamine, an amino acid, for biosynthetic functions that glucose alone can't fulfill. The competitor videos present the metabolic cancer argument as if glucose deprivation is the complete picture. It isn't. Ketosis addresses the glucose side of cancer metabolism, but not the glutamine side. This doesn't undermine the argument, it refines it. And knowing the limitation of any intervention is part of evaluating it honestly. What is clearly established? People who maintain higher circulating ketone levels, even the mild nutritional ketosis produced by MCT oil, show lower levels of inflammatory markers that correlate with cancer risk, lower fasting insulin that correlates with reduced cancer risk, and better mitochondrial function that supports the DNA repair mechanisms that prevent malignant transformation. Here's where James comes in. James is 71, retired engineer from Austin, Texas, the kind of person who, when he decides to try something, does it correctly. He'd read about MCT oil, ordered C8 specifically, started blending it into his morning coffee every day without fail. 8 weeks in, he wasn't seeing the results the research suggested he should. He came to me frustrated, not angry, just analytically puzzled. He'd done everything right. When I asked him to walk me through his exact morning routine, we found it within about 2 minutes. Every morning, after his MCT coffee, James would eat a small bowl of oatmeal and half a banana. He'd read that oatmeal was excellent for heart health, which is true. He'd been told that fruit in the morning was a good nutritional choice, which is also true. What he didn't know, and what I'm about to show you is the most actionable piece of information in this entire video, is that those carbohydrates were switching off the protocol he was trying to run. A randomized controlled trial conducted at the Karolinska Institute, one of the most respected medical research universities in the world, based in Stockholm, enrolled adults aged 65 to 73, specifically to test what happens when C8 MCT oil is consumed in coffee alongside glucose versus without it. The finding was unambiguous. When carbohydrates were co-ingested with the MCT coffee, the ketone response was significantly suppressed, brought down to the level of a control oil that produced essentially no ketones at all. Let me explain the mechanism, because understanding it makes the rules stick. When you consume carbohydrates, any carbohydrates, including fruit, oatmeal, toast, juice, your blood glucose rises. Your pancreas releases insulin. Elevated insulin is a direct metabolic signal that suppresses the liver's production of ketones. The liver reads the presence of insulin as, "There's plenty of glucose available, no need to make ketones." And ketone production stops, regardless of whether you also consumed MCT oil. The MCT oil went in. The chemistry was waiting to happen. The carbohydrates, even a modest, healthy amount, told your liver to stand down. This means that anyone drinking MCT coffee with breakfast, with oatmeal, with fruit, with a piece of whole grain bread, with anything that raises blood glucose, may be getting essentially zero of the metabolic benefit. Not reduced benefit, essentially zero. This is why consuming the MCT coffee on an empty stomach and waiting at least 2 hours before your first meal is not a preference or a lifestyle choice. It's the mechanism. The 2-hour fasting window is what preserves the space in which the ketone production, and everything downstream of it, can occur. Once James adjusted his timing, MCT coffee first, nothing else for 2 hours, then breakfast, his results changed within 3 weeks. The biology he had been trying to activate was finally allowed to run. The competitor content in this space is focused almost entirely on the morning. And the morning protocol matters enormously. I've just spent 20 minutes explaining why. But there is an equally important and equally evidence-backed piece of this system that morning-focused content consistently ignores. What you do in the evening. A 2026 randomized controlled trial published in Arteriosclerosis, Thrombosis, and Vascular Biology, conducted by researchers at Northwestern Medicine, enrolled middle-aged and older adults at cardiometabolic risk and had them make one change: stop eating 3 hours before bed. Not a different diet, not fewer calories, not different food, just a consistent time boundary in the evening. The results, without any change to what or how much participants ate, included improvements in blood pressure, heart rhythm regularity, and fasting blood glucose. The mechanism is circadian alignment. Your body has a biological clock, a circadian rhythm that governs not just when you sleep, but when your metabolic systems are active and when they're meant to wind down. Your liver's insulin sensitivity, your gut's absorptive activity, your pancreatic function, all of these operate on a timed schedule. Eating close to bedtime asks your metabolic systems to work during the hours when they are biologically programmed to rest. Here's the connection to the morning protocol that nobody explains. The MCT coffee works best when it extends an overnight fast. That fast begins when you stop eating in the evening. If you stop eating at 7:30 p.m. and drink your MCT coffee at 7 a.m. the following morning, you've given your body a 12-hour fast before the ketone production even begins, and BHB levels are already naturally beginning to rise. The MCT coffee then amplifies and extends that metabolic state, rather than having to create it from scratch. The morning window and the evening boundary are two sides of the same metabolic system. Optimizing the morning while ignoring the evening is like filling one side of a bathtub while leaving the drain open on the other side. For most people, the practical implementation is simple. Set a food cutoff time in the evening. 7 p.m. or 7:30 p.m. works well for most schedules. That one change, the Northwestern Medicine data suggests, has independent metabolic benefits even before you add the morning protocol. Here's something I want to cover that no other video in this space addresses. And I'm covering it because I think personalized information, even when it applies to a minority, is part of what makes a recommendation actually useful, rather than just broadly appealing. Approximately 1 in 4 people, roughly 25% of the general population, carries at least one copy of a genetic variant called APOE4. It's the strongest known genetic risk factor for late-onset Alzheimer's disease. And research from the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, along with multiple peer-reviewed pharmacogenetic studies published in journals, including the Journal of Alzheimer's Research, has found something significant about how APOE4 carriers respond to MCT oil. The cognitive benefits of MCT oil and ketone supplementation, the improvements in mental clarity, the reduction in brain fog, the neuroprotective effects, are consistently documented in clinical trials in people who do not carry the APOE4 variant. The research is reasonably strong on this. In APOE4 positive individuals, the same studies consistently show no cognitive benefit. In some carefully controlled trials, APOE4 carriers experienced worsening on some cognitive measures. There is also evidence that MCT oil can elevate LDL cholesterol in APOE4 carriers in a way it does not in APOE4 negative individuals, likely because ApoE4 impairs lipid metabolism in ways that interact with high-fat intake. The reason appears to be that ApoE4 alters how the brain handles lipid metabolism, specifically impairing the very pathway through which ketones provide their neuroprotective benefit. What does this mean for you? If you've been hoping for cognitive improvement from the MCT protocol, clearer thinking, less brain fog, better memory, and you haven't seen it after consistent use, your ApoE status may be relevant. You can find out through consumer genetic testing services. This doesn't necessarily mean MCT oil is harmful for you. The fat loss and mitochondrial effects may still apply through separate pathways. But it does mean the cognitive and potentially the cancer metabolism effects may not work the same way in your biology. I raise this not to discourage anyone, but because roughly a quarter of the people watching this video carry this variant, and they deserve to know. Here's something most people don't know about this. Here's something most people, including many doctors, don't know about this. BHB has been shown in cellular research to extend lifespan in model organisms through HDAC inhibition and upregulation of a longevity-associated gene called FOXO3A, research from the University of South Florida, the same institution associated with much of the cancer metabolism work I described. This is not human data, and I'm being careful to say that. But it is a signal about the range of cellular processes that BHB appears to participate in, and it is from credible researchers at a credible institution. One more piece of the picture that the competitor videos miss completely, and it's brief but worth knowing. C8 MCT oil, caprylic acid, has demonstrated antimicrobial activity against pathogenic gut bacteria, reduction in intestinal permeability, and support for beneficial gut bacteria, including a strain called Akkermansia mucinophila, which has been associated with metabolic health in a growing body of research. The aging gut microbiome, which is a topic I'll do a full video on, is characterized by declining populations of beneficial bacteria and rising populations of pathogenic ones. This imbalance drives what researchers call inflammaging, a low-grade chronic inflammatory state that accelerates virtually every age-related disease we've discussed today. MCT oil, through its antimicrobial and microbiome-supporting effects, is essentially acting as a gut health intervention at the same time it's acting as a metabolic one. This is a brief mention because the full gut microbiome story deserves its own video. But it's worth knowing that the morning MCT coffee habit is doing something beneficial in your gut that most of the content discussing it doesn't address at all. Let me give you the complete protocol, specific, practical, and built on what the most current research supports. Use C8 MCT oil specifically, caprylic acid. Not a generic MCT oil blend, which typically contains a mix of C8 and C10, and sometimes C12, lauric acid. C8 converts to ketones most efficiently. C10 has some of the same properties. C12 behaves more like a long-chain fat and produces far fewer ketones. Look for a product labeled C8 or caprylic acid. Most quality brands make a pure C8 version. Here is something that will surprise you. 3 separate randomized controlled trials by researchers at Showa Women's University in Japan, Izaki, Abe, and colleagues, published in Frontiers in Nutrition in 2023, enrolled nursing home residents with a mean age of 85. Among the most frail and physically depleted elderly people studied anywhere in the world. They gave participants just 6 grams per day of C8-C10 MCT oil, roughly half a tablespoon. After 3 months, participants showed significant increases in muscle mass, grip strength, walking speed, and knee extension strength relative to the long-chain fat control group. Half a tablespoon. In 85-year-olds in nursing homes. The competitor videos in this space, including popular ones, use 14 grams as the floor clinical dose. The Japanese frailty literature suggests the therapeutic threshold in real-world older adults may be considerably lower than that. If you are 60 and relatively healthy, 6 grams may be more than enough to begin seeing effects, and it is a dose that virtually eliminates the gastrointestinal side effects that cause most people to abandon the protocol in week 1. Start with 1 teaspoon, roughly 4 to 5 grams, blended into black coffee on an empty stomach. That is all. Do that for the first week. Do not add butter. Do not extend the fasting window. Just get the MCT coffee on an empty stomach into your routine for 7 days. Use a small handheld frother or a blender, 15 to 20 seconds. This emulsifies the oil into the coffee rather than leaving it floating on the surface. Emulsification dramatically improves the palatability and reduces the likelihood of gastrointestinal discomfort. Stirring with a spoon is not sufficient. The frother takes 20 seconds and makes a meaningful difference. After your MCT coffee, nothing for at least 2 hours. No food, no other beverages with calories. Water and black coffee are fine. The Karolinska Institute research is clear. Carbohydrate co-ingestion suppresses the ketone response to the level of a control oil. This 2-hour window is non-negotiable if you want the protocol to work. Stop eating 3 hours before bed. For most people, that means somewhere between 6:30 and 7:30 p.m., depending on your schedule. This is not about calories or what you eat. It's about when. The Northwestern Medicine 2026 RCT demonstrated that this timing change alone improved cardiometabolic markers in older adults without any other intervention. And it sets up the overnight fast that makes your morning MCT coffee significantly more effective. Week 1. 1 teaspoon of C8 MCT oil in black coffee on an empty stomach. Evening food cutoff. That's the entire protocol for week 1. Week 2. Add unsalted grass-fed butter. Start with half a teaspoon. The combination of MCT oil and butter produces a more sustained ketone elevation and improved satiety. Blend together with the coffee for 20 seconds. This combination, sometimes called bulletproof coffee, has been studied specifically, and the combination produces longer-lasting energy and reduced morning hunger. Weeks 3 to 4. Increase MCT oil to 1 full tablespoon, approximately 13 to 14 grams, if your digestive system has tolerated the lower dose without issue. Some people are comfortable at this level quickly, others take longer. There is no benefit to rushing. Weeks 5 and beyond. If you want to amplify results, add 2 to 3 sessions per week of resistance training. Not necessarily gym-based. Bodyweight squats, resistance band exercises, and compound movements with moderate weights are sufficient. The MCT coffee consumed 60 to 90 minutes before exercise, provides sustained energy without glycogen dependence. You won't feel the mid-workout energy drop that often causes people to curtail sessions. And resistance training provides the mechanical signal that directs the mitochondrial rebuilding effect toward muscle growth rather than just maintenance. After exercise, consume 20 to 30 grams of protein within 2 hours. This provides the raw materials for the muscle protein synthesis that the ketone-activated mTOR pathway is signaling for. The combination, MCT oil's anti-catabolic effect, mTOR activation from ketones, and post-workout protein, creates the complete biochemical environment for simultaneous fat loss and muscle preservation. The Nosaka et al. Study published in Nutrition and Metabolism in 2019, which followed 40 adults aged 55 to 75, using 14 grams of MCT daily for 12 weeks, confirmed via DEXA scanning that participants lost body fat while gaining or preserving lean muscle mass. That simultaneous outcome, fat loss with muscle preservation, is unusual and clinically significant. Weeks 1-2. The first change most people notice is not in body composition. It's in morning energy and mental clarity. The ketones from C8 MCT are a preferred fuel for neurons. Many people describe a reduction in the mid-morning brain fog they had quietly attributed to aging. This is real. It is measurable. It is the neurons responding to a more efficient fuel source. You may also notice reduced hunger in the morning, a direct effect of elevated ketones on appetite signaling. Some weight loss may appear in the first 2 weeks, but this is primarily water associated with glycogen reduction, not fat. Weeks 3 to 8. Fat loss becomes measurable. Expect gradual, consistent reduction, primarily visible first in abdominal circumference. Energy levels continue improving. If you have added resistance training, strength levels will hold steady or improve despite being in a modest caloric deficit. The MCT-mediated muscle preservation effect. Months 2 to 3. The mitochondrial biogenesis effects are more fully expressed by this point. This is the time frame where people describe something that sounds almost too good to be accurate, feeling like they have more consistent energy than they've had in years. The research supports this. It's not placebo. It's the cumulative effect of mitochondrial rebuilding. Biomarkers begin improving. Fasting insulin typically decreases, HDL cholesterol typically rises, and abdominal circumference continues declining. Consistency at 70% is worth more than perfection for 2 weeks followed by abandonment. If you miss a day, you haven't undone anything. The protocol works through accumulation over weeks and months, not through perfect adherence on any single morning. MCT oil is very well tolerated by most people, but there are specific situations where caution is warranted and physician guidance is appropriate. If you have active liver disease, MCT oil is processed entirely by the liver. Impaired hepatic function can be worsened by significant fat intake. Speak with your physician first. If you have type 1 diabetes, the ketone production from MCT oil, combined with insulin deficiency, creates a risk of ketoacidosis. Physician supervision is required. If you have type 2 diabetes managed with insulin or sulfonylureas, MCT oil improves insulin sensitivity, which is generally positive, but can lower blood glucose enough to require medication adjustments. Monitor your blood glucose and work with your physician. If you are on warfarin, changes in fat intake can affect vitamin K absorption and alter clotting parameters. Monitor your INR. If you have elevated triglycerides, it's worth knowing that a 2021 systematic review published in the Journal of Nutrition found that MCT oil does not significantly affect LDL or total cholesterol overall in most people, but can cause a small triglyceride increase in a subset of users. The claim in some videos that MCT oil directly drops triglycerides is misleading. Triglyceride reduction is more likely a result of the fat loss and caloric deficit the protocol produces, not a direct effect of MCT oil itself. If your triglycerides are already elevated, monitor this. For most people over 60 without these specific conditions, C8 MCT oil is one of the most well-studied and well-tolerated dietary interventions in the current literature. Your doctor knows this science exists. The question is whether a standard appointment has enough time to walk through the protocol in detail. That's what today was for. Before making any changes to your diet, supplement routine, or health habits, especially if you're managing existing health conditions, please speak with your doctor or healthcare provider. This video is for educational purposes only. I want to close with Margaret. Margaret is 69 years old. She spent her career as a nurse in Minneapolis, decades of caring for other people, understanding the body, watching what happens when people don't take care of themselves. She came to this protocol skeptically. "I've seen too many miracle cures," she told me. "I don't expect much." She started with 1 teaspoon. She set her evening food cutoff. She waited 2 hours in the morning before eating. She didn't tell anyone she was trying it because she didn't want to have to explain if nothing happened. 14 weeks later, she described what had changed. Not the weight, though that had shifted gradually and noticeably. Not the blood work, though her fasting insulin had come down and her doctor had remarked on it. What she described was a Tuesday morning. She said, "My daughter called and asked if I wanted to go for a walk. A long one, maybe 3 miles. And I said yes without calculating anything. I didn't think about whether I had the energy. I didn't plan for a nap afterward. I just said yes. We walked 3 miles. I kept up. I wasn't managing myself. I was just there." That is what this is actually about. Not a number, not a biomarker, not a before and after photo. A Tuesday morning where you say yes to something you had started quietly refusing, where your body is available for your life in a way it hadn't been. The biology behind it, the mitochondrial rebuilding, the stem cell protection, the metabolic shift, is real, and it is documented. But what it produces in practice is something quieter and more valuable than any clinical measurement. It produces presence. It produces the capacity to show up. You now know something about your own biology, about what is actually happening at the cellular level after 60, and what the most current research suggests can be done about it, that most people your age haven't had the chance to sit with in this kind of detail. And you've heard it from the primary literature, with the factual corrections included, and with an honest account of the limitations. I want to hear from you. Tell me your age in the comments below, and tell me the one thing you've quietly started accepting as just part of getting older. The fatigue, the brain fog, the thing you used to do that you've stopped doing. I read every single comment, and what you share shapes what I research next. I'll see you in the next one.